I did not cry. I did not argue. I simply put my phone back in my pocket, looked out the window at the bare oak tree in my backyard, and made a decision. That was a Tuesday in early November. My son had called me that morning, which should have been a good thing. He rarely called just to talk anymore. Usually it was a question about money, or a problem that needed fixing, or something his wife needed me to sign. But that Tuesday, he called to tell me that Thanksgiving this year was going to be a small gathering. Just immediate family, he said. Just the nuclear family. His words. I asked him to clarify what he meant, because last time I checked, I was his father. I had been his father for 31 years. I had been there in the delivery room when he came into this world, red-faced and screaming. I was there for every Little League game, every school play, every speeding ticket, every heartbreak. I was there when he lost his first job and needed 3 months of rent covered. I was there when he and his wife wanted to buy their house and needed a co-signer because their credit was not strong enough. I was there every single time. He said that his wife's parents were coming, and they wanted it to feel intimate. He said his wife felt more comfortable with just her side of the family this year. He said he hoped I would understand. I told him I understood completely. And I did. I hung up and sat in my kitchen for about 20 minutes without moving. I am 64 years old. I retired from 32 years working as a structural engineer. I built bridges, literally. I know how weight gets distributed. I know what happens when you remove a load-bearing element from a structure that has been designed around it. The whole thing shifts. Sometimes it holds. Sometimes it does not. My wife, Patricia, passed 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She was gone in 4 months from diagnosis. After that, my son was all I had left. His wife, her name is Renee, had never been particularly warm toward me, but I told myself that was just her personality. Reserved. Private. I respected that. I drove to their house every other Sunday. I brought groceries sometimes. I fixed their leaking gutters last spring. When their dryer broke in February, I drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm to look at it, diagnosed the problem, ordered the part, and came back the following weekend to install it. I never charged them a dime. I never asked for anything except to be included. My son's name is Daniel. He is 31 years old. He works in marketing for a software company. His wife is a dental hygienist. Together they make decent money, but they spend more than they make. They always have. When they got married 5 years ago, Patricia and I paid for most of the wedding, $62,000. We told them it was a gift. We meant it. When they bought their house 3 years ago, I co-signed the loan and covered the down payment as a loan that we never formally structured as a loan, because Daniel was my son and I trusted him. $80,000. When Renee decided she wanted a new car 2 years ago, Daniel called me and asked if I would help with the monthly payments because they were stretched thin. I agreed to cover $350 a month toward the payment on her Lexus SUV. When Daniel's own car needed replacing last year, I agreed to cover his payment as well. Another $400 a month. $750 a month, total, going toward their vehicles alone. I am not telling you this to make myself sound like a saint. I am telling you so you understand the weight of what I held in my hands that Tuesday morning after my son told me I was not welcome at Thanksgiving. I did not call Daniel back that day. I did not text Renee. I did not tell anyone what had happened. I went to my workshop in the garage and spent the afternoon building a small cabinet I had been meaning to finish for weeks. I sanded the edges until they were smooth. I stained it a warm walnut color. I let it dry overnight. I find that working with my hands helps me think clearly. By the time I came back inside, ate dinner, and sat down with a cup of decaf coffee, I had made a list in my head. It was a short list, but it was clear. The following morning, I called my bank. I canceled the automatic transfer for Daniel's car payment. The representative asked me to confirm. I confirmed. She asked if I wanted to set a future restart date. I said no. Then I called the finance company for Renee's Lexus and did the same. I had been the one who set up the payments from the beginning, so I had the account access. I canceled. I did not send a dramatic message. I did not write a long email explaining my feelings. I simply stopped. That was a Wednesday. By Saturday, Daniel had not noticed. People rarely notice the absence of something until the moment they need it. The following Tuesday, 9 days before Thanksgiving, my phone rang at 7:45 in the morning. It was Daniel. "Dad, did something happen with the car payment?" I told him good morning. "I got a notice from the finance company. It says the payment didn't go through this month." I told him that was correct. There was a pause. "What do you mean? Did something happen with your account?" I said my account was fine. Another pause. Longer this time. "I don't understand." I told him that I had decided to make some adjustments to my monthly expenses. I told him, calmly and without any particular emotion, that I had been covering $750 a month in vehicle payments for the past year and a half, on top of everything else I had contributed over the years, and that I had decided to redirect those funds. He said my name. Just my name. I asked him how Thanksgiving planning was going. He didn't answer that. He said, "Dad, we can't cover both payments right now. You know that." I told him I did know that. I told him I had known that for a while, and that it had weighed on me, and that I had decided the best thing for everyone was for him and Renee to take ownership of their own financial obligations. He said he needed time to figure things out. I said that was reasonable. I wished him a good day. I hung up. My hands were steady. I want you to know that. My hands did not shake when I set the phone down on the kitchen table. I had not been cruel. I had not yelled. I had simply stopped carrying something that had become too heavy and too one-sided. Patricia would have understood. She always had a clearer eye for this kind of thing than I did. She used to say that love without boundaries wasn't really love. It was anxiety wearing love's clothing. I used to think she was being too hard. I understand now what she meant. By Friday of that week, I had received 4 more calls from Daniel and 2 texts from Renee. Renee's texts were not kind. The first one said that I was being childish and that my behavior was affecting her family. The second one said that she had always known I had issues with her and that this confirmed it. I read both messages carefully. I did not respond to either. The Thursday before Thanksgiving, Daniel came to my house unannounced. I saw his car in the driveway from the workshop window. I took my time wiping down my tools before going inside. He was standing on the front porch when I came around the side of the house. He looked thin. He had dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the 9-year-old boy who used to fall asleep on the couch watching baseball with me, his head on my shoulder. Then the moment passed. He said he needed to talk. I invited him in. I made coffee. I did not make any speeches. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the same table where I had eaten breakfast alone every morning for 6 years since his mother died. And I waited. He said things were harder than I knew. He said he and Renee were under a lot of stress. He said that her parents had strong opinions and that Renee felt pressure from them. He said that Renee's mother had made it clear that she felt I was too present in their lives and that it created tension. He said he was just trying to keep the peace. I asked him whose peace he was keeping. He didn't answer. I asked him if he remembered when he was 19 and he got into a car accident at 2 in the morning and called me instead of calling the police because he was scared. I drove 40 minutes in the rain to stand on the side of that highway with him until everything was handled. I did not ask his mother's family to stay home that night. I showed up. He stared at his coffee cup. I told him that I had loved him every day of his life without condition and without keeping score. I told him that I was not going to chase after someone who had decided I was inconvenient. I told him that the car payments were not coming back, and that the Thanksgiving invitation, or the lack of one, had simply helped me see something I should have seen sooner. He said he was sorry. I told him I heard him. He asked if we could fix this. I told him I hoped so, but I told him that fixing it was his work to do, not mine. I had been doing all the work for a long time. He left about an hour later. We hugged at the door, briefly and a little awkwardly, the way men do when they are not sure where they stand with each other. I watched his car back out of the driveway. Then I went back to my workshop. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it with my neighbor Carl and his wife Beverly. Carl is 68, retired Navy, makes the best smoked brisket I have ever eaten. Beverly's sweet potato casserole is something close to a religious experience. We sat around their table for 4 hours, ate too much, watched football, and talked about nothing important. It was one of the most peaceful evenings I had spent in years. I slept deeply that night for the first time in a long time. What I did not know, sitting at Carl and Beverly's table eating brisket, was that things at Daniel's house were becoming complicated in ways that went beyond the car payments. Daniel called me the Monday after Thanksgiving. His voice was different this time, quieter. He said that Renee's Lexus had been flagged for a missed payment, and that they had received a formal notice from the finance company. He said they had made one payment to catch up, but it had wiped out most of what they had in savings. He said they were trying to figure out how to cover both vehicles going forward on their income, and that it was more difficult than he had expected. I asked him what their monthly take-home was together. He told me. I told him, gently, that based on their rent and their vehicle payments and their other visible expenses, they had been running a deficit for over a year, and that my contributions had been filling that gap without either of us formally acknowledging it. I told him that this was not sustainable and that it was not healthy for him, for Renee, or for me. I told him that I was willing to sit down with him and help him build a real budget, the way my father had sat down with me when I was 28 and newly married and drowning in bad habits. I told him I was not his enemy. He was quiet for a while. Then he said something that surprised me. He said that Renee's parents had offered to help cover the Lexus payment temporarily, but that her father had attached conditions to the offer that Renee did not feel comfortable with. He said it was becoming clear that her parents' money came with strings that were harder to manage than he had anticipated. I did not say anything to that. I let him sit with it. Over the next several weeks, things continued to unravel in ways I had not engineered, but also could not prevent. The second missed payment notice arrived. Renee called me herself for the first time in over a year. She was not warm on the phone, but she was not hostile either. She was scared. She asked if there was any way I would consider resuming the payments, even temporarily. I told her I would not resume the payments in their current form. I told her that I was happy to have a real conversation about what sustainable support looked like going forward, but that I was not going to step back into an arrangement where I was contributing $750 a month to their household while being excluded from their lives. She was quiet. I asked her, plainly and without anger, whether she understood why that felt unreasonable to me. She said she thought she understood more than she had before. That was more than I expected. I want to be fair about that. In December, Daniel's car, a 3-year-old pickup truck, was flagged for repossession after 2 consecutive missed payments. He called me the night before it was scheduled to be picked up. He had clearly been crying, though he was trying not to let it show in his voice. He said he did not know what to do. He said he needed the truck for work. He said he felt like everything was falling apart. I drove to his house that night. It was cold, the kind of dry December cold that settles in your bones. I sat with him at his kitchen table, the same kitchen table I had helped him and Renee move into that house 3 years ago. Renee was home, but she stayed in the other room for most of the conversation. That was fine. This was between me and my son. I told him that I loved him and that would never change. I told him that watching him struggle was not easy for me, because it was never supposed to be easy for a father to watch his child in pain. But I also told him that I had watched him let someone else define who belonged in his life and who did not, and that the person who had ended up outside was me. I told him that I was not there to lecture him. I was there because when things got hard, I still showed up. That was who I was. He asked me if I had done all of this on purpose, if I had canceled the payments as a lesson. I told him the truth. I told him that I had not done it as a lesson. I had done it because I was hurt and because I was tired and because I had finally understood, at 64 years old, that I had confused providing with belonging. I had thought that as long as I was needed, I would be included. I had been wrong about that for a long time. He put his head in his hands. I told him that the truck would be picked up in the morning unless he could make the payment. I told him I would loan him the money to catch up, not as a gift, but as a real loan, with a written agreement, the way grown men handle things between them. I told him the same offer extended to the Lexus. But I told him that going forward, we were going to have a different kind of relationship, and that meant he needed to decide what kind of son he wanted to be. Not to me as his financial resource, but to me as his father. He nodded. He wiped his eyes. He said he wanted to be better. We shook hands on the loan that night. I wrote it up on a piece of paper and we both signed it. Renee came out of the other room just before I left. She did not say much. But she looked at me differently than she had before. Not warmly, not yet, but honestly. And honestly was enough for me to work with. The truck stayed in the driveway that night. I drove home in the dark, past the fields on Route 9 that I had driven past 100 times before, and I thought about Patricia. I thought about how she would have handled this better than I did, and sooner. I thought about how 6 years without her had made me grip the people I loved too tightly, confusing generosity with security. I had poured money and time and energy into my son's life, not only because I loved him, but because I was afraid that without it, he would drift away and I would be alone. I had enabled the very distance I was trying to prevent. That is a hard thing to understand about yourself at 64. But it is not too late to understand it. Christmas that year was different. Daniel called me 2 weeks ahead of time and asked if I would come for dinner. He said it would be both families. He said Renee had agreed that it mattered. I said I would be there, and I asked what I could bring. He said just himself. He laughed a little when he said it. It was not a perfect laugh, but it was a real one. I brought a pie anyway. Pecan, from the bakery on Elm Street that Patricia used to love. I brought a bottle of good bourbon for the table. I brought myself, on time, with no expectations. Renee's parents were polite, stiff, but polite. Her mother complimented the pie. Her father asked me about my years in engineering and seemed genuinely interested, which surprised me. Renee set a place for me at the main table. Not a side table, not a corner. The main table. I did not make a production of noticing. I just sat down. Daniel and I did the dishes together after dinner while the others sat in the living room. We did not say anything important. We talked about football and about a bird feeder I was building in the workshop. But there was something different in the air between us. Lighter, more honest, the way things feel when the pretending has stopped. I drove home that night with the windows down despite the cold. I am 64 years old. I have buried my wife and outlived 2 of my closest friends, and watched my son make choices that broke my heart more than once. I have made my own mistakes, more than I can count. But I am still here. I still have my health and my workshop, and Carl and Beverly next door, and a son who, I believe, is trying to find his way back. I do not need to be the most important person in the room. I do not need to be thanked every time I show up. But I will not disappear quietly while someone else decides I am optional. Not anymore. I am a father. I built things that were meant to last. And I know the difference between a structure that is worth saving and one that has been neglected past the point of repair. This one is worth saving. And this time, we are going to build it right.